Welcome to Keep 'em Healthy with Jamie, your go-to classroom for integrative kids' health and wellness. I'm Jamie, a biology professor, an integrative health coach, and most importantly, a mom who's been through it all. When the conventional medical system couldn't provide the answers my own child needed, I took my background in anatomy, physiology, and nutrition and went looking for a better way. Join me as I chat with experts and physicians to help you decode your child's biology and psychology from childhood through young adulthood. If you're ready to stop guessing and start understanding, you're in the right place. Let's keep them healthy together. Hey everyone, welcome back. So I am sitting here today with Kirstin McGowan, again, who happens to be a rock star when it comes to education policy and tech. So she's been a previous guest on the show for episode 79 and 113, both episodes geared towards technology and our kids. So please check them out. But I don't know if you're living in Pennsylvania or not when you're listening to this, but there is some buzz surrounding the Senate Bill 1014, so SB 1014. And we are talking about the phone-free schools bill. So that's that bell-to-bell ban that has every parent in my neighborhood either cheering it or spiraling. So we have questions. And so we're going to dive into those, the pros, the cons, and just really talk about what this means for our kids. So let's get into it. Kirstin, welcome back.
Great to be back. Thanks for having me.
All right. So you're going to start with just kind of going over the memo of what this is, this SB 1014.
Yep. Absolutely. So SB 1014 was introduced last fall, so fall of 25. It has three co-prime sponsors. It is Devlin Robinson out on the western side of Pennsylvania, Hughes in the Philadelphia region, and then Steve Sanacero here in Bucks County, who is also a former teacher. So he's got a lot of credibility in this space. So first of all, Pennsylvania is woefully behind other states of the union. 31 states, and then in addition, Washington, D.C., have some state standard around cell phone policy in schools. And so we're playing a bit of catch up. So SB 1014 was introduced in fall of 25. It has strong bipartisan support, even like the Washington Post and New York Times have commented that this topic is like the last true bipartisan effort happening in this era. But exciting news, it passed the PA Senate on February 3rd of 2026, so very recently, with a very strong 46-1 vote, which sent, I think, a really strong message that folks are behind this. Right around the same time, Governor Shapiro came out strongly saying, I support this effort. I look forward to this hitting my desk and we'll plan to sign it. So where it is sitting right now is with the Pennsylvania House Education Committee, who needs to, propose this and then put it up for a vote. We're getting indications that will likely happen in this current session, so probably in the month of April. So we are kind of very much anticipating some movement here at any moment. This is a bell-to-bell bill, which means it limits and restricts access to cell phones from the first bell of the school day to the last. So it includes instructional or kind of the academic time and non-academic time. So that's no cell phone use during lunch, recess, in between classes. All of the time that is kind of considered the school day, which is a departure for a lot of school districts that have some kind of policy in place. One important piece of information is the way that it is written. It is basically designed, assuming it gets passed in this session, it will not go in effect until the 2027 school year. So it's giving school districts a lot of time, a year plus, to kind of prepare, make appropriate policy changes, et cetera. So that's kind of the table setting. But I'm happy if you've got questions and you want to, pepper in, or if you want me to just kind of walk through the pros and the cons, I can do that too.
Yeah. So why don't we start with the pros of why we might love this for our kids?
Yep. I mean, go back to the two previous episodes to hear all the reasons why, cell phones are probably not a great idea to put in kids' hands too early without the right skills and the right context. But a couple of stats I think out of the gate that I think are important. One is 97% of school students are using their phones during the school day, according to Common Sense Media. Students are spending on average an hour plus on their phones during the school day. This is coming out of some really recent research from Angela Duckworth and her survey on focus on the phones coming out of University of Pennsylvania. NEA, which is kind of the National Education Association, polled, this is over a year old now, 83% of teachers support an all-day phone policy. They're tired of policing them. And then students, just an interesting fact, students not using phones during class wrote down 62% more information. So clearly there's like I'm not focused, I'm not paying attention to what's happening, and doing the kind of thinking, processing, handwriting down, taking notes part of learning. And then the average student receives over 237 notifications or pings per day, many of which are happening during kind of waking hours, so during the school day. Tons of distractions. There's like pages and pages of stats to support why the distraction in the classroom is a big deal. But when we think about the pros of having a bell-to-bell, statewide standard, I think there's three big kind of buckets. The first is academic success. So if you think about, teachers don't want to police the devices. They want to focus on education and connecting with their students in the classroom. We need to get them out of the classroom to reduce kind of those distractions, the pings, the thinking of, I might be missing out on some plans and I'm going to be thinking about it and not focused on what's happening in math class, so that as soon as I get to the hallway, I can, follow up with it. Having it off and truly away for the day will allow kids to just like refocus and kind of have a safe place to learn. There is lots of research and studies, of which I'm happy to share all of the citing for this, but increase in focus and cognitive performance, improving test scores and grades, and then eliminating what we talked about, kind of the partial presence of just like being half in the classroom. So those are some of the academic pieces. Worth noting, there are quite a few of both state and national organizations that are very much in favor of bell-to-bell, which is kind of the gold standard in cell phone school policy. In the state of Pennsylvania, the PSCA, so the kind of largest teachers, association, has come out strongly in favor of this, which is we've talked about this in previous episodes, but a huge shift from kind of where they were a year ago. I think they see the research too, but the teachers are tired. They're up against so many distractions, and they don't want to be kind of the person constantly saying, put it away, put it away, put it away. They want someone else to come in and help support that. So that's the academic piece. The second is, we'll kind of call it the mental health bucket. And this is about, school is not just about like the ABCs and what is like the academic component of it. It is about social, emotional learning and health. How do I interact with adults? How do I, hold myself accountable, develop and build, executive functioning skills? How do I learn how to make friends and sustain them? Because that is part of growing up. And so one of the big things that we are seeing of schools that have moved to bell is removing the cell phones and the ability to kind of quickly pick up, it's sitting in front of me, but pick up and hide behind the phone and look busy and look cool. It forces you to engage in the world around you and with the students. And so kids are missing out on this. And we're hearing from parents and teachers and, employers of like, this generation of kids doesn't know how to engage and communicate. It also encourages emotional resilience and problem solving. So you can't just text people, you have to engage. So there's just like a different level and modality of engaging. And then the other big piece, which is on a lot of parents' minds and educators' minds, is removing the social media access during the school day helps eliminate, or at least create, kind of a bubble of safety from cyberbullying, which is happening more and more, and kind of all of the online catfishing and all of that craziness that is happening that scares many of us. So that's kind of the mental health piece. The third is safety, which, I get a lot of questions about, but the importance around the school safety piece is both kind of the online safety, so not having access to, pornography, gambling, cyberbullying, but it's also kind of the physical safety. And this one can be a tricky conversation nationally and at the state level. The National School Resource Officer Association, as well as Pennsylvania, have come out strongly in support of bell-to-bell cell phone restrictions, because when the most horrific thing happens in a school, there is a active shooter event, there is some kind of physical safety event, having kids focused on the teachers, the plans that are in place, and being quiet are the most important things to keep our kids safe. And so, partly it is removing that distraction, removing a place for misinformation to travel, for pings and, phone calls to be happening when you're supposed to be quiet. And so that is super important. in keeping the line of communication and connection clear for first responders and administrators to keep our kids safe. So those are kind of the three big buckets: academic, mental, and safety. And why I think so many, when the research supports it, by why so many schools and states are kind of moving towards creating kind of the bringing back kind of the sanctity of the educational environment for optimal support for our kids.
Yeah. And to piggyback on all of that information, I'm a parent and I'm also a educator. I'm a teacher. I teach biology. So I'm teaching these college students, and I see a lot of the parallels when it comes to, for instance, like when I teach a lab, you are not allowed to have your cell phone out during once the lab begins, because we're dealing with chemicals and formaldehyde and different things. And like, you do not want this on your phone, right? So it's kind of interesting because when I walk into the lab, you will see most of the students are not speaking to each other. They're on their phones, doing whatever they're doing, looking busy, being cool, right? And then you put these cell phones away and we start the lab. And then the lab is super social. I mean, you're working with groups and lab partners every single time you show up, and you're there for over an hour to 2 hours. Okay. So full social time. And let me tell you, these kids are starving for interaction. They have the best time with each other. But I will say this, like, I will notice that we might be 3 labs in and I'll say, is so-and-so here today? And they're like, who? I'm like, your lab partner. And they're like, oh, that's their name. And I'm like, oh my gosh, guys, you got to like ask their name.
You know them by their handle.
Yeah. Though that's their name. I'm like, yeah, that's their name. And they're like, oh, well, no, they're not here yet. But I saw them walking. Like, it's so interesting what they choose to absorb. But that being said, I find such joy when they are doing, like, the one lab we had. It's kind of like almost like a doctor's office. You're doing reflexes, you're doing eye exams, stuff like that. Super fun. And they are laughing and they're talking. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is so wonderful. So, and because there is no crutch, there is no access to the cell phones, no one's allowed to have it out. And so what I like about having the cell phone bell to bell being taken away from the top, using the legislation, like everyone's doing it, because for one teacher to be like, I don't want it out, but the rest of the teachers have it out. Like, you can't, there's no doing that. The kids will override that in a minute, and as much as you think you have control in your classroom, there is only so much you can do. So it is nice for teachers to be like, it's not even my law. It is the law. So that makes a big difference for teachers in regards to support, and for students to follow the rules of it, because if it's not consistent, then they're going to keep doing what they want to do, which is what kids do anyway. We know this in our home. So you need consistency in your processes and your expectations and your consequences, whatever it is. So anyway, so I'm circling a little bit all over the place.
100%. I would add to that, which is what we're finding, through my work with PA Unplugged and even here in Central Bucks is, yes, you're absolutely right. The teachers don't want to have to be like the bad one that doesn't allow you to use them, even though all of the research suggests the kids are going to perform better and be more engaged and talk more. But what we're finding is, and we'll get into this a little bit, and some of the pushback is, we'll let the school districts decide how they want to do this. If anyone's opened a newspaper or looked at the news, school districts don't like anything that's going to ruffle feathers.
Right.
And there's plenty happening for a variety of reasons that is shedding kind of not good light on a lot of school districts, ours included. And so I think so many school districts are even nervous because they don't want to upset parents. They don't want to be the bad guy, even when all of the research supports it. We don't allow cigarettes. We don't allow guns. We don't, there's a lot of things we don't allow for the safety protection, both of the individual and the community, to create a safe academic environment. And cell phones are now part of that category of things that need restriction. And that's not to say, I know we've talked a lot about, my thoughts and feelings in the research around, cell phones, but this is not about like shaming anyone for allowing their kid to have one. Look, when you're a high schooler and you're driving and you've got after school sports and you're not, you're out the door at 5:30 and not home until, 7:30. Yes, if I too plan that my kid will need some way of communicating with me, but during the academic day, when their job is to be a student, having unfettered access to social media, sports apps, whatever, it's just not the right place and time. And so I think the importance of, and we're behind in Pennsylvania, of having a statewide standard, just to your point, like, just makes it clear, like, this is not happening here in Pennsylvania for our kids.
Right. And I think it's super important. And the other thing I've noticed, and because I also teach a lecture, and I tell them specifically, I'm like, please turn off your phones and all things. Notifications are so distracting, not only for you, but the people sitting next to you because they think it's their phone and then they think they're missing something. And I say to them, I'm like, we don't give the PowerPoints ahead of time because we want them to sit and take notes. We want them to have that eye to hand to brain interact because it's a better way of learning. And I really try to reinforce, I'm like, this is part of your study time, guys. You sitting here, listening to me, writing things down, taking notes, that is part of your studying process. You sitting here and not writing anything or thinking about anything other than what's happening on your phone, which is still going to be there when you end the class. I promise you, it's not going anywhere. It's not going to like fly away, right? Like it's all going to be there. I promise. So like stay here, be in the moment. And then that means that you don't even have to take as much study time in the future about the notes because you're already absorbing, you're already learning. It's already part of your muscle memory, all these things about what you are learning. But it's so hard. And these young kids, to have that sense of control, you're not going to find many because even adults have trouble. So of course, if we give them any access or any option, they're going to take it and it's going to be a distraction. So that's why I really like, it has to be like a full stop during those bell to bell hours.
We're seeing, there are professors at Wharton that don't even allow laptops in their lecture halls anymore because of exactly what you just articulated. I want you focused. I want you listen. We're recording all of this so you can get the transcript. But like what we're hearing is the level of engagement, dialogue, the richness of the learning is like back to standards from, 15 years ago before all of the distractions. And I'm old. We're both old. But like, I remember when you could bring the laptop and it was like early days to bring a laptop into a lecture hall. And just the clickety clack was like irritating for me. I can't even imagine what it's like to be in the classroom right now. But yeah, I'm with you.
It is. And I've walked by and then I see them playing, like two students were supposed to be working on something together and they're playing a game on the computer together. I'm like, come on, you're in college now. Like this this shouldn't be happening anymore. Like you're paying for this, right? So that's a whole different conversation.
100%.
But it happens because again, it is distracting and all the other things that go with it. But I do love, so that's like, I feel really strongly about the academic side for focus and for the teachers, right? And then the social side, I see the positive when the cell phones have to be away and these kids are interacting. And there is not a single person who doesn't feel that joy when you see these kids just filling their cup and interacting and having that connection. It's so great.
Yeah, so totally.
I'm for it, but let's go to the con side. Let's do the stuff that is making people worried. So go ahead in that bucket.
Yeah. Let me list a couple things that I think are important because a lot of people are like, whoa, my kid has this, need and all these things. So there are some exceptions that are absolutely appropriate and included in SB 1014. So one is a 504 or, a IEP, and it has to state that there is a specific stated need for a cell phone, but there are carve outs in this for kids that have different learning modalities. If there is a medical need, if you're using it to monitor glucose or I'm sure there's a million other reasons you would need it, that is allowed, obviously with written doctor permission, et cetera. What else do we have in there? Used for translation, if there's not another translation tool for English as a second language students. And then there is a tiny carve out that got added when it was getting passed through the Senate that allows for the building principal, if there is a specific need for a class, and it is like a 1 day exception, the way that it's written, because we're kind of in this messy middle where we've used them, students have used them and teachers have used them so much in different apps. We've heard from teachers that there's this very specific editing app for photography that is only available. And so I think what we'll see is this is going to be used very, very sparingly, and hopefully we'll find ways with one-to-one devices or other technologies that are available in the schools to be able to tap into those to fully remove the use of the cell phones. But for, the bulk of the student body, not having access during the day is the goal of the bell to bell bell. So let me talk. I've got a list. There were kind of 7 big kind of pieces of pushback I have heard and have been, talking to folks about. So the first is like cell phones are just a part of life and they need to learn how to manage them. And there's like, the answer to this one is like, yes. And there are boundaries and rules around the appropriate place and time of using things. There's lots of examples in all of our lives. And so yes, like having a bell to bell, statewide standard does not mean that we shouldn't be teaching our kids about appropriate use, about online safety, about, how and when to text whom and on what topic, or how to send or not send photos. So it's like, this isn't replacing that. We still need to create the right learning environment, and parents and educators, we need to figure out how to do that and build the right, coursework around that. And we're making a statement that we believe education is important and we need to eliminate the distractions. So this one I think is a little bit of I kind of think it's a lazy pushback, which is, oh, it's just part of life. Well, we don't let people, smoke in classrooms. When you're 18, yes, you can go buy a pack of cigarettes, but that does not mean it is safe or appropriate on the school grounds. So kind of, it's part of life piece. The second, and probably one of the biggest pieces of pushback, is the safety piece. I hear a lot from parents that just say, I want to be able to access my kid, or let them access me, if something is going on in the building. And I struggle with this one, to be perfectly honest, because I can appreciate, as I'm a rising middle schooler, being in a big building with a lot of students, but knowing that our safety experts, both nationally and at the state level, have done the research, they have been in our schools and dealt with these events. To me, this is the what if maybe here in my community versus the everyday harms of academic distraction, mental and social challenges, the online safety. I can't prove this, but I'm hoping over time we will be able to, is if we can swing back to a in-person, live, connected kids in our school communities, gosh, I wonder if some of these really awful events might decrease, because kids feel connected to their community, accountable for one another. And so I think this is one of those where, I struggle to say leap of faith, but I think we need to kind of get back to what is the most important thing. And it is the day to day. And it is all of the things that are contributing to that for a maybe someday horrible event. And, I think this one also tethers on just the overall access. So some parents will say, if there's an emergency, they need to contact me. And then I hear from a ton of teachers and students of my mom or my parent is the biggest offender of pinging me throughout the day. What do you want for dinner? Did practice time change? What do you think of this? Or don't forget to turn in this homework assignment. And so there's the safety piece, but the access piece I think is really important too, because I think that there is a bit of a reckoning we as parents need to kind of understand, is just because we can, contact our kid does not mean that we should. Reminding them about the homework assignment is not teaching them the core skill. And so I think for a lot of this conversation, it is around, what are we trying to teach our kids? What do we value as a community? How do we set our kids up for success? And so,
well, and if I can piggyback on something
please.
like that, it's also, we were talking about, we're trying to teach our kids appropriate times to use a cell phone. It's also, as a parent, you can call the school building and get a hold of the secretary and get a hold of your child if you really truly need to during appropriate times. If there's an actual change, an actual thing, which that had happened to me once, where I needed to get a hold of my kid to say something has changed and he does not have a cell phone in the school, and all things got to him and he was fine and we made it work. The secretary's like, yep, I know exactly where he is, because they have their schedule. I will make sure he knows. Great. Thank you. High five, call it a day. Right. Yep. And it was a situation where I did need to, and I did have access to him. So I did not feel like, what are we going to do? He will never know. It was like, oh, call the school. Okay. They have phones and they can handle that.
Well, and I also think that it forces us as parents. I mean, if there's a major schedule change, right? Yes, you need your kid to know what's going on, but then that administrator can get that note to them at an appropriate time. That's not in the middle of a math test.
Right. And it makes you think about, is this actually an appropriate thing that I need to call the school for? It makes you take a pause. Whereas if you have constant access, you're just dumping all the information all the time at them. Yep. So there's situations, yes, but there's also now, as parents, to be take a step back, being like, is this appropriate? Do I really need to get in contact with them? Is it worth me calling the secretary?
Totally. Yes. We don't have, just because we can doesn't mean we need to. Right. And we should. Totally agree. The third one is, this is how my kids connect and talk to their friends. And great, sure. But during the academic day, talk to your neighbor, get to know your lab partner's name, make plans in real time. And that's not saying that you can't make plans after school. You can just do that as soon as the bell goes off at 2:35.
Right.
And so, I think I don't want my kid making weekend plans in the middle of a science lab. Like, that is not the appropriate time and place to be doing that. And I think we're giving kids so many more ways to be distracted from their real job, and what should be their primary focus. The fourth is kind of a little bit of a catch-all, but like my cell phone or my tech device as a tool. So like I use it as a calculator, I use the calendar, I use the apps. Great. But there are calculators that are way better and are, the scientific calculators that you should be using for math. You're not going to be able to have a cell phone out when you're taking the SATs.
Right. Right.
Like, think about like the right tool at the right time. And let's not forget that most of the kids we are talking about or that are going to be listening to this, they've got school issued one-to-one devices. If there is a tool that is not there and it is required, that is a conversation that should be had at the teacher administrative level around the resources that kids have access to.
Right.
And so I think, again, this one's a little bit of like a lazy answer of I do all my things here. So I think it's also learning how to use all of those tools. Funny aside, but one of the things we've been talking about in my house is like, because we don't allow, well, they don't have phones, but like iPads or anything in their bedrooms. And I'm like, let me teach you how to use an alarm clock. Let me teach you how to use a calculator. Like,
Yep.
You need to learn how to use all of these things because someday you might not have a phone, or access to an iPad at your disposal. Number 5 is local control. This is a big one. And so we hear a lot about this issue. It's in Pennsylvania and a handful of other states. It's big because we've got localized school boards. We have like 400, 500 school districts or something crazy here in the state of Pennsylvania. Great news. If you really care about this issue, SB 1014 does not dictate how. It does not dictate any details around what the consequences will be. It gives each school district a lot of leeway on how to manage and restrict. You cannot have access from first bell to last bell, but that can mean so many different things depending on your community, your school setup, et cetera. And so this one I think is often just like a political push without understanding it's actually already baked into it. And important, right? Because each community has a different setup. A small, more rural community might have an easier way to manage than a more urban setting. What I will say, this is not necessarily pushback. Well, actually, I'll hop down to one that's related. I do hear a lot of pushback around like, this is an unfunded mandate. You hear that on so many issues. And sure, yes, there are right now, unless things change with budgeting happening, at the state level, it is unfunded. But the way it's written, it does not require any purchases or any, yes, maybe a policy change, but that's not like costly necessarily. Could there be cost associated? Yes, if a school district decides that the best way for them and their community is like the Yonder pouches or some other way of, concealing the phones during the school day, yes, there would be a cost associated that would be incurred. Let me tell you, I did the research for Central Bucks a year ago. For all of our middle school and high school students, it would be less than $250,000 to do the training, get the pouches, and do all of that for our large 17,500 student school district. That is pennies for what we are spending on tons of ed tech that has very little proven value on upgrades to, school buildings is one thing, but there's a lot of things we are wasting money on, lawyers' fees, that we could be using for these kinds of things. So it gives a ton of control. There's school districts in central Pennsylvania that started using their lockers again. Like, it is required to be in the top part of your locker. You cannot pull it out if it's seen, and there's consequences. So yes, local control. School boards will need to decide how they want to rewrite policy to adhere to SB 1014. Should and when it is instituted, but it doesn't have to come at a cost. And I actually think that the recovered academic time of teachers, the potential of not needing as many school security officers managing the stuff that comes up because of phones, I think we will find an easy swap in any of those costs, probably within the first 6 months to year of any investment that's made. One other big one, and then I'm open if there's other stuff that you are hearing. I don't hear this in this community as often, but I do in more urban settings. The concept of like, is this a prison or a punishment pipeline? And so I think there's like confusion around a statewide standard versus like, it is illegal. It is not illegal for a teenager to own a cell phone. What we are saying is it is not allowed to be used during this time. And for a lot of equity reasons, there are concerns around, is this a way for let's just call it inner city schools for kids who are offenders to then end up in prison or end up, in serious detentions and those kinds of things. And first of all, there is nothing in SB 1014 that dictates, what the consequences are for repeated, offenses of the statewide standard. And so, no. And I think that, there is kind of an asterisk here of school districts think about what the right consequences could and should be for your community to make sure that we are creating. The idea here is to create a safe environment for academic success and building kids and future community members. It's not about putting kids in trouble. And so I think part of this is, how does as a community this? And if it is around these are our new expectations, and it is cool to do this and to be engaged in your community, I think we'll find, yes, are kids going to test the boundaries? Yes. And you know what? That is normal for teenagers. But if we hold the line and make it clear, I think we can balance that without kids, having serious negative, consequences. But I hear that a lot, and it pops up in some conversations, but there's no dictating how that is managed here in SB 1014. So I'm curious, Jamie, if there's other things that you're hearing or pieces of pushback.
Well, it's not exactly that. I feel like you hit all the main hitters that I've heard of. I was just curious, in your opinion, knowing our Central Bucks school district, so obviously that community is going to look different than an inner city school or a super rural school. I totally understand that. I was just curious of your take of what it would look like. Would it mean buying pouches? Would it what consequences would you think would be, the appropriate response to this bill? So I guess what would you say, just from your opinion, not just from what all the research you've done, what would be your step-by-step approach of putting this bill into play at CV?
Yeah. I mean,
if you were in charge.
Maybe unpopular, but I do think that there is something about the mental exercise and physical exercise of putting the phone in a pouch. Let me be clear. I am not funded or supported by Yonder. I just that has been the preeminent approach for a lot of school districts. Are there ways around it? Sure. It's not a perfect solution. It's not super costly. But
so I just want to be clear, though. They are coming into school. They're opening their locker, and their pouch and their phone are going into their locker.
So it actually is when you come into the school building. And so basically they're neoprene pouches. So they became super popular actually before kind of the school cell phone movement. But Chris Rock mandated these at his shows because he was I don't want people recording or doing flash photography. So this is a technology. It is a tool that is used when you go to the Capitol building and can't, be taking photos. So it's used in a lot of venues outside of school. So imagine a neoprene pouch, and it's got a magnetic lock on it. And so basically I get off the school bus at, the middle school. And as I walk in, I have my own pouch, right? Kids are assigned them, they're assigned their other things. My phone goes into the pouch, and there's basically these locking mechanisms. They can be on the wall. Some schools will just have them on a desk with a teacher monitor who's just watching the kids coming off the bus. I just hit it, and it basically locks it, and I can put it in my locker or put it in my bag. The beauty about this piece is that a lot of school districts, one of the concerns is, I don't want to be responsible if I take the phone. I mean, some of these are $1,000 pieces of equipment, right? I don't want to be liable as a teacher or school district for misplacing, breaking, whatever, it gets stolen. And so it's a way for a student to kind of quote unquote keep possession of it, so it doesn't have to get turned into an office, while having the exercise and the practice of, it is now away. I have put it to bed for the next, 6 hours or whatever you're in school. And then it goes ideally into your locker, because the science also says if you got it by you throughout the day, you're tempted and you think about it. So that, if I were in control and made the decisions, that would be my preference, because I think it sends a very clear signal. we're not sneaking it, in the hallways. We're not, doing a burner phone over here. Like it is a way. We have other schools that it is just like it goes in the locker, and they're like the regular hall monitors. If they see it, it's an infraction. So I think there's lots of different ways. I've heard of these are some way smaller scale than central bucks, but like manila envelopes that go that are on a cart, in the office. And so when you're done for the day, you pick up your phone and you move on. So there's lots of different options, but I do think that there is, especially in a district like Central Bucks, where my understanding is high schoolers aren't even assigned lockers anymore. You have to request it. I don't know. I don't know for sure, but I think we've got more bodies than locker availability, and the kids, I guess, just bring their backpacks everywhere now. So I think a pouch will be a smart thing to explore for our school district, but might not be right fit for smaller or other districts. To your second part of the question around kind of consequence in policy, I think one, I would recommend that we look at what is working for other things like vaping tools or any other things that are kind of contraband that kids can't have during the day. What has been working, for our school district in terms of, allowing a kid to test, but then being, making it really clear this is not something you're going to continue to get away with. I was talking to a teacher friend who's got family who teaches in New York, and this school district never allowed phones. I was like, oh, you don't have to fight this battle. This was just never even on the table. But it's like the first time it gets taken and it sits in the principal's office until the end of the day. The second time mom and dad are contacted and it is, back into their possession. And the third infraction is you have lost a privilege to have this on your body at all. You actually have to check it into the office and check it out at the end of every day, which is a lot of administrative work. So hopefully we don't get there. But I think, if you can't be trusted to follow the rules, then you lose privileges to even have it on your body or in your locker. And so my hope is that we can come up with some kind of, appropriate escalation of that, but that we balance it with why are we doing this? Because there are more groups of kids, especially college age and others, that are saying no and going to flip phones and other things. And so I think we're in that messy middle, but I'm hoping that this will be a for the kids that are in early elementary of like, yeah, this is a distraction. This is preventing me from, doing the things I want to do and be independent. So like, I'm going to focus. And so I'm hoping we can find the right balance of the right consequence structure, but also bringing the kids along as to why this is important for them. So that's what I would do.
Yeah, no, I like that response. And I remember when I was in high school, we did have cell phones. And if it was out, the disciplinarian took it and had it in his office. You had to go get it at the end of the day, which was terrifying because you're like, oh God, he was a pretty intense guy. I mean, it was all fair and, but, and then the second time it happened, then it would be your parents had to come pick it up. You couldn't pick it up. Your parents had to come. So how pissed are you as a parent if you have to take time out of your day to go to school to go get that cell phone? Like that's not okay. So I do think that can have some impact, but I like your piece about the education behind it. And so that the student understands why you're doing what you're doing. The parents understand why you're doing what you're doing. Like nobody really wants this responsibility, right? At the end of the day, like the disciplinarian and the staff, like they don't want to have to monitor cell phones. The teachers, nobody wants to have to monitor them. So let's just make it a non-issue, put them away. And then at the end of the day, everyone can get back to life as status quo and we all move on. That's the hope. And we can stay focused when we need to and then enjoy whatever the cell phone gives you, on your off times. Perfect.
Totally.
Done. Check the box. So
a funny little anecdote related to that. As I was doing some conversations in Harrisburg, there's a staffer who works in one of the senator's offices from Central PA, and he's the local high school swim coach. And he's young and like vibrant. And I was like, oh, he's going to be totally anti this. And he was like, no, he was like, I am all on board. And he said, I'll get a high school student that will be like, hey, I can't come to practice today because like I have this really big, AP test or whatever, and I can't do it. And he said, he goes, they don't even come to me anymore. He's like, which I do worry about. And he says, hand over your phone. And so the rule is that these high schoolers that swim for him, if they're going to skip practice, have to show that they are under some threshold of amount of hours of usage or average use on their phone. And he's like, if you've got time to spend 9 hours on your phone every day, you had time to study for your test outside of, and so honor the commitments that you make And so like, I actually think there's a way that we can almost gamify and flip the script a little bit, which is kids have the time, kids have the ability, getting back to the, like, it's part of life. Like, yeah, they need to learn. And part of this is limiting and restricting during the school day. And then they've got to figure out, like, how do I fit in all the other things that I want to do? But
it's that accountability piece. It's that accountability.
But the success stories, which I know are still early, stages, but like coming out of New York, coming out of other school districts around the country that are doing this, they're amazing. I mean, I shared with you, I think on the last episode, a guidance counselor from the western side of the state. They went bell to bell at the start of this school year. And she said she was so busy like the first couple of weeks, and it was not the cyberbullying or the whatevers. It was kids switching out of study hall to take electives because they could no longer just sit and play on their phones. The state of Kentucky has seen a surge in library books being signed out because the kids can't be on their phones. So they're like, when I've got free time between classes, if I'm not doing homework, I'm reading. I'm like, this is gold for a parent and an educator. So I know we're gonna have some bumps and some parents who are, not thrilled with this. But I think when we see the academic, success improve, the mental health of our kids, start to improve, and kids learning how to use this because we've created some boundaries for them and said, we care about your education and your mental health. This is a safe place, not a place to use it. I'm excited to see what we're able to reap in terms of benefits.
I am too. And Kirstin, I appreciate all of your information. I know how much time and energy that you spend on just diving in and researching and communicating with other people and just getting to the basics and also figuring out ways that you can communicate and help this community that my family lives in, which I'm very much appreciative of. And I just think all this information that you dropped today, it's so real. Like the pros and the cons are all real things that are happening. And, you gave a different perspective of understanding, like some of these parents have never stepped inside a school. How would they know what's going on or what the teachers' issues are, what the safety issues are, and what is the actual most beneficial route for these students? And so this is why I love this podcast. I'm like, let's open these gates and open our eyes and get a full view so that we can make better decisions and that we can really understand where we're at with raising our kids. Yeah, that's the bottom line. So thank you, Kirstin, so much for being on the show. I really, really appreciate you. And I hope for all good things for this Senate bill as it continues on its journey. And you'll have to keep me posted because I'm terrible at keeping up with this stuff.
Well, I'll make one little plug. If you go to paunplugged.org, we've got some incredible resources. We've literally got this great little timeline that shows the tracker of where it's sitting and the details of it. And there's tons of info on there. So if people are interested and want to learn more, paunplugged.org is a great resource.
Okay, perfect. I love that. And I know that they have an Instagram and all, so I can add that at the end of the show notes so that everyone can see that. But thank you, Kirstin, so much. This is so great. I appreciate you. And who knows, maybe I'll be back once again. You're my freaking flyer these days. I appreciate it.
Thanks for the invite, Jamie. Talk to you soon.
Listeners, thanks for hanging out with me in the classroom today. If today's episode sparked a new idea for you, please make sure to click follow on your podcast app so you never miss a conversation. If you know a parent who is currently struggling to find answers, please share this episode with them. You just might be that link to help them on their journey. And finally, if you're a wellness expert or mom with a story to share, email me. I'd love to have you on the show. Until next time, keep them healthy.